They don't wait for the phone to ring. They bring new ideas to their clients. Oftentimes before clients have even realized that there is a risk or an opportunity, it's all the unpaid work and help I offer that pays my bonus next year and the year after and the year after that. They don't fear getting a big invoice for that, but they respect your capabilities enough that they're going to come to you first.
Well, the top of the morning to you, and welcome to It's a Good Life. I'm your host, Brian Buffini, and today we have a special guest. His name is Matt Dixon. He's a founding partner of DCM Insights, which focuses on using data and research frameworks to help companies attract, retain, and grow their customer base, which means he really helps salespeople like me. So Matt is a best-selling author and speaker. Today we're going to be diving into his newest book, The Activator Advantage, What Rainmakers Do Differently. Matt, delighted to have you. Thanks for taking time to be with us today. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian. Thanks for the invite. It's great to be here.
You know, I love sales. Sales
you and me both.
Well, it's dug me out of a hole. It's changed my life. I was virtually bankrupt in America with bills and medical bills and everything else as a 19-year-old. And it helped me become a millionaire by 26. And then it's helped produce 5,000 millionaires through our coaching program.
Yeah.
And yet we live in a world today, Matt, where people are embarrassed to be called a salesperson. Young people, Gen Z, it's like you call them a vampire. And because of that, you know, people shrink from it. And I've always said my whole life, nothing happens in this world without a sale. You can promote, you can social media yourself, you can do this, you can do that. But why do people have such an adverse reaction to being called salespeople, do you think?
So it's a great question. I watched the other night, I'd seen it many times before, but I watched the movie Glengarry Glen Ross.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's and I think it's honestly, Brian, I think it's things like that. It's The Wolf of Wall Street. It's The Boiler Room.
Always be closing.
Yeah. Coffee is for closers.
See that watch? It's worth more than your car.
So I think that's why people don't like sales. So, you know, I mean, honestly, I think all joking aside, but I think. Well, it may be a couple of things. I think one is it's this profession that Hollywood's kind of given a pejorative connotation. But I also think people tend to assume that, you know, selling is this thing that you do when you're trying to convince somebody to do something they otherwise wouldn't do. And so it comes across as kind of underhanded and unseemly. Yep. And you know, this book, this new book, The Activator Advantage, we actually delved into a world of people who have to sell for a living, but absolutely sales is a 4-letter word in their world. And these are professionals. So you think about consultants and lawyers and accountants and people who sell themselves. They sell advice for a living. And, you know, you mentioned the word sales and you'll get kicked out of, you know, 90% of the rooms with these people.
Right.
It's not something that folks are comfortable with. I think I've had partners in some of the biggest law firms in the world say, hey, I didn't go to law school to be a salesperson.
Right.
You know, but as a partner in my firm, I'm expected to make it rain, and you know, so I do what I have to do, but I don't enjoy it. I don't like doing it. I don't feel like I should have to. I feel like clients should find me, right? Because they should know that I'm an expert, and they should just pick up the phone and give me a call.
Yeah, people want somebody to buy from them.
Exactly. Yeah,
but they don't want to have to sell anything.
They don't want to sell. That's right.
Now, I'm a son of a 5th-generation house painter, and the principle was he had a principle that says, you know, can you put your name to that? My father, my grandfather, can you work in such a way that you put your name to it? And then the other side of it, my father told me, is the work speak for itself. Mm-hmm. Now, when I came to America, I didn't have 5 generations of doing the business behind me. And I found out that the work didn't speak for itself, no matter how genuine I was, genuinely put my customers first, genuinely did. Never once in my entire career ever put my own motives above a customer, in my whole career. Mm-hmm. Yet, I had to find a way for the work to speak for itself.
Yeah.
Why do we have to help people through this? Because it just seems that folks have this, and then they have this frustration of, I don't want to sell, I don't want to be a self-promoter, I don't want to make people feel awkward, and then at the same time this burning frustration that they see people who are less competent, perhaps less integrous, prosper, and they're like, what's up? Yeah,
it's, you know, so you're describing one of the in the book we talk about kind of 5, if you will, 5 profiles of business developers or rainmakers, and one of them we call the expert. And this is a very common, especially in service businesses, it's a very common posture where one burnishes one's own credentials, based on the quality of their work, the depth of their client relationships, their reputation in the marketplace. So I might be the world's greatest coach or the world's greatest consultant in a specific area, or the world's smartest attorney or accountant or tax advisor. And, so these folks focus on speaking and publishing and things like that. And then they like to aggressively wait for the phone to ring, right? So they sit back and they feel like I shouldn't have to bring myself to these clients. They should find me and they should reach out to me. And what happens though, I think that some of that stuff doesn't sound so bad, but I think the unfortunate part of that approach, especially in today's much more competitive buying environment, is that by the time the client finds you, they're probably also talking to some other folks who claim to be experts in the same exact area, and now it's a race to the bottom on price. And so I think it's all well and good to have a product, to have a capability that stands on its own, that is world class, and I think for sure, like that's absolutely the core of any good commercial approach. But what we found these winning professionals do, these activators, is that they don't rest on their laurels. They activate their expertise. And I think one of the big differences is they don't wait for the phone to ring. They bring new ideas to their clients, oftentimes before clients have even realized that there is a risk or an opportunity that they should be getting after. And I think in their minds, when you talk to them, they actually wouldn't call it selling. They'd call it helping. And I think so. I interviewed a consultant at a Big Four firm just the other day, very successful Rainmaker in this firm, and a big book of business, and has been quite successful commercially. And I asked, what is it do you think characterizes your approach? And he said, I like to think of the paid work I'm doing as paying my bonus this year. It's all the unpaid work and help I offer that pays my bonus next year and the year after and the year after that. And what was interesting, Brian, is that in our study, we found the most predictive variable in this huge study of 3,000 partners out there at some of the biggest firms in the world. The most predictive variable was how partners responded to the following statement: that my clients reach out to me even when we're not engaged in paid work. So think about that. Right. The kind of client you have that's going to text you in an evening or a weekend and ask for your opinion or just pick your brain and run something by you, and they don't fear getting a big invoice for that, but they respect your capabilities enough that they're going to come to you first. That presents an amazing opportunity to shape the way they understand an issue or opportunity, ideally in a way that leads them to you and earns some goodwill. But it is this interesting posture people have when they think about selling. And I think the very best say, no, it's just a different form of helping. Right. I'm just being proactive. I'm bringing these new ideas. I'm planting the seeds with these. I'm trying to build the relationship actually before we get into paid work. Whereas most salespeople feel like we'll build a relationship after you buy something from me, and I'll demonstrate my qualities to you and our capabilities, and then we'll have a great relationship. Activators think of it very differently. The relationship happens first, and then paid work is just the natural evolution of that relationship.
Well, you are singing to the choir. In fact, I'm going to recommend that the Rainmaker Genome Project does a study on Buffini Company's clients.
Yeah, there you go.
Because if you think about what we teach,
I'm sure you got a lot of activators amongst your clients.
Well, here's the deal: we have 22,000 people we work with. We teach them to sort and qualify their database by relationship categories, build a relationship, and then provide value. Provide value every month. Yeah. So if in the real estate and lending space, it's like, hey, here's how to raise your credit score. Here's how to protect your family from identity theft. Every month. We help our clients build out a network of professionals. So if Matt Dixon's roof is leaking, I want him calling me as a realtor.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If he needs a gardener, if he needs a babysitter, if he needs a recommendation for where to take a client.
I definitely need a babysitter for me.
Right?
I don't know.
Yeah. So there it is, Matt. And so, we created this dynamic.
Yeah.
And here's the deal. Because I've been accused, Buffini, he teaches this soft sell approach and so on and so forth. For the last 21 years, our clients have averaged 10 times that of the average realtor. Yeah. So it's a validation of everything you're saying. And you mentioned these 5 business development groups. I read this in the Activator, and you talked about the experts. Can you go through those 5 groups? Because I think people will see themselves in it, and then maybe we can extrapolate how to make them a little more proactive.
Yeah, absolutely. So the expert we talked about, right? This is the reluctant business developer aggressively waiting for the phone to ring. Right. I don't need to go out to the clients; they'll find me because I'm so well known.
We call him the brilliant Maytag repairman. Remember that?
There you
ad?
go.
They're sitting there waiting, and when it comes, they're fabulous.
Oh yeah. So the second one is we call them the confidant. The confidant is, I would call them kind of an old school trusted advisor. What I mean by that is, and by the way, not to denigrate that concept because I think it's a great concept. Yep. And actually, I think the people who wrote that book and came up with that concept, David Maister, Charlie Green, and the like, would probably say this is kind of a caricature of what they meant. But what these folks do is they try to build and hoard a small set of very deep client relationships. So they, as one chairman of a big law firm said to us, they try to build their personal set of ATM machines and then just stand by those machines and collect money for their careers. Now, they're able to do that and build these deep relationships because they deliver great work and because they bend over backwards for their clients. They try to build not just business relationships, but even personal relationships with these clients. But their mindset is, if I do good work for the client and if I've got a great relationship and when they ask me to jump, I ask how high and I bend over backwards for them, the next time they have a need, they should come to me. And it would be like a violation of our relationship if they made me compete for the work. Now, some of those attributes, again, sound pretty good, but the downside or the dark underbelly of the confidant is inside of companies, inside of firms, they can be very sharp-elbowed because their mindset is, I'm trying to, now firms are trying to get their partners to bring the breadth of the firm's capabilities to the client. Now, but what these folks really focus on is just selling what they can do in their own expertise, and they don't ever bring in their colleagues because they live in fear of the bad things that might happen if a colleague comes in and kind of rocks the boat, upsets the apple cart, and then they're set back. They have no backup plan. They have a small set of key client relationships, right? The third one is I call them the debater. The debater is sort of maybe a sharp-elbowed, opinionated know-it-all. So these folks they're more interested. Their approach to sales is to basically tell the client they're doing it wrong. You know, you came to me for X, but you really need to be focused on Y. You know, and they try to totally reframe the client's own understanding of what they should be doing. Now, what's so interesting about this profile is that many years ago, we wrote a book called The Challenger Sale, and that's more about people who sell products, right? So manufactured products, technology, et cetera. And what we found is this debater is pretty analogous to the challenger, which was the winning profile in business-to-business sales. But when you're selling advice and expertise, and you think about brokers and realtors and wealth managers and lawyers and consultants, where you're selling yourself, you're selling advice. That in that world, these debaters don't do particularly well. And what that taught me as a researcher was, look, you can be a debater if you're selling a product, but if you are the product, that's a tough posture to adopt. It doesn't mean you shouldn't tell your client they're doing it wrong. And clients want their sellers, their partners, the people they work with to tell them when they're headed down the wrong path. But clients will also say, look, if every time I sit down with you, you tell me I'm doing it wrong, I don't have time for that. It's just mentally exhausting, right? Sometimes I just need you to do what I know needs to get done.
Or in our business, the debaters show up agent to agent.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And by the way, you know, we have an epidemic in real estate right now. Everybody talks about low interest rates, and we have the lowest number of sales in 30 years when the population was 80 to 90 million less than it is today.
Yeah.
So this is like all-time worst 3 years we've had, in my opinion, in 100 years. And we have an epidemic of transactions blowing up every month. Willing buyer, willing seller, two agents in between. And we have a little bit of nervousness, a little bit of scarcity. And what tends to happen is this opinionated stuff shows up. And instead of it's called a cooperating agent.
Yeah.
We're seeing deals blow up at a rate of like 60,000 a month.
Wow.
So you're talking about the overall transaction, about 10% of all the transactions that happen. You know, you're looking at 4 million transactions a year. So it's, you know, what's that, $720,000? It's almost 18% of the market.
Yeah.
So 18% of all sales are blowing up. And I believe 90% of it is because agent to agent, and they get into this dynamic. So how do you have an opinion without always need to be right in order to facilitate your customer?
Yeah.
Your buyer wants to buy, your seller wants to sell, and yet your opinion, your ego, or your fear is blowing up the deal.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, the message here for agents and for sellers is to not to put your opinion aside. And by all means, if you've got a point of view that you think is going to help your client get to a better outcome for them, for their business, for their family, then you need to share it. But I think that there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and maybe a right time and a wrong time to do it. And you've got to be careful of putting your ego about the strength of your point of view ahead of the client's interest. So in that case, seller and buyer interests aligned, and what gets in the way is that two debaters at the agent to agent level maybe locking horns and blowing up the whole deal. Well, clearly not in the seller or the buyer's best interest for that to happen.
Right.
So we see that as well. You think about in our research, we see it like around M&A transactions where you've got a business owner and you've got a buyer, and then in between you've got the tax advisor, the lawyers, the investment bankers, and they're kind of locking horns with their counterparties. But meanwhile, just as you said, the buyer and the seller want to do this deal. They want to get to common ground, but it's all those intermediaries that are kind of mucking things up.
Yeah.
So I'll really finish off the last two. So we got the realist is the fourth one. The realist is very truthful, transparent, honest with the client. That all sounds like great stuff. But they tend to be a little bit glass half empty. So they tend to approach the client from the posture of how much longer things are going to take, how much more expensive they're going to be, how low their expectations should actually be. So they're all about, under promising and over delivering. But that under promising angle, again, they don't do this because they're Debbie Downers. They do this because they know people have been burned in the past and been hoodwinked and have one put over on them. And they say, look, my clients will be loyal to me if I give them the straight scoop and I tell them what they need to hear, not just what they want to hear. Clients, though, they want the people they hire to paint the art of the possible, right? Don't just tell me what we can't do together. Tell me what could happen if everything goes well. Like help me paint the big vision, right? I want to have proper expectations, but let's be a bit more aspirational. And then the last one, as the title of the book suggests, is the winning profile, the Activator. The Activator is a super connector. They're doing many of the things, Brian, that you teach your clients to do. So they are out there building and cultivating their professional network. And I would argue that most of them would say my network is actually my most important business asset. It's more important than my law degree. It's more important than my consulting experience. It's my professional network. Now, they're very active on LinkedIn, not surprisingly. They're also very active at conferences and events. So these are the people who in simple terms, they work the room, right? You see them go in, they don't stand in the corner waiting for a client to approach them and hand them a business card. They're out there. They've got a target list of people they've scheduled coffees and lunches and dinners with, people they want to get out there and collect a business card from. Now, we didn't call them connectors because I think it undersells what's happening here. They're not trying to collect LinkedIn connections or business cards. They're trying to turn those into paying client relationships. And the way they do it is really unique. They really focus on what we talked about before, proactively bringing new ideas to their clients. So you talk about the newsletter, the outreach, the cadence of insights and perspectives that could be valuable to your clients. That's exactly what activators are doing. They're bringing those ideas to clients before clients even oftentimes recognize the need. Now, they're not charging the client for those ideas and for that insight and for that help, but they're paying it forward, right? They're laying the groundwork for paid work by earning some goodwill, earning some trust. And, more than anything, being seen by the client as the person who thought of them, who brought this idea to them. When everyone else is waiting for the phone to ring, you said, I think you might be interested in this, might be valuable to you. And then the last thing I'll say about activators is, unlike those confidants who try to box their colleagues out and they just want to own the client relationship themselves, activators bring their colleagues in. They do it for a couple of reasons. I think one is that they're very proud of their colleagues. And for an activator, they'll say, look, if I'm working in this part of the business and Brian's working in a different part of the business and my client has a need that aligns with Brian's expertise, all I have to do is make an introduction. Brian's going to knock their socks off, and then I'm going to reap the rewards because the client's going to thank me for making the introduction. So I just have to sit by and watch the magic happen. So that's just good stuff. But the other thing they'll say is I think in a world where clients are just less loyal than they once were, they don't automatically come back to us with follow-on work. They make us compete for the business in a way they never did before. You're better off building multiple points of connection with your clients. So if the client's only buying from me for what I can do for them, that's fine. But if the client's buying from the we of my firm and they're doing work with me and with Brian and with other partners and colleagues across the firm, that's a relationship that the client thinks twice before they cut the cord because we're supporting them across lots of areas of their business.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to point out that Matt Dixon is not on the payroll of Buffini and Company. And these opinions are his own opinions that just happen to radically align with what we've been teaching. And it's great to hear it from a different perspective. Yeah. I'll give you 2 points of validation in our own database. Sure. One, in regards to the activators in our database, they're the ones who go to the most events. So they go to events, they're connecting, and so on and so forth. In our coaching program right now, when the market's down, people are struggling. Our average coached client, approximately 19% of their revenue comes from agent to agent referrals.
Isn't that interesting?
So they're building relationships, they're connecting. And like, okay, I'm in Florida. I met an agent we had an event last month in Vegas, and we had people show up, and they networked, and they built their business cards and so on and so forth, and they exchanged referrals. And I already heard of people going, yep, I got a referral from that guy in Texas. And so the second thing is, when I first started Buffini Company, I made a mistake. And that is, I hired these consultants. And these consultants, who cost a lot of money, especially for a startup, said, the one flaw in your system is you're building your business based on the fact that if you do a great job for your customers, stay in contact with them and remind them, you say they'll refer you. Why would people refer their competition? Now, we've been 30 years in business, right? And at one stage, we went through a 10-year period where we grew no less than 49% a year. That was the lowest number.
Insane, yeah.
With no advertising budget, all by referral. So just to validate your point, which is people will bring their colleagues in, people will network, and these activators are really people who are interested in building relationships,
that's right,
exceeding expectations, and doing more for their customers. And what we created was just a little dynamic, was to ask this phrase. They're following on, they're giving information, they're helping people with all these ancillary things. They check in with their customers all the time. And it's, by the way, if you know anybody who'd appreciate what I bring to the table, I'd love your referrals. Yeah. And just we call it the by the way, it's just a gentle reminder. What are the other things you see activators doing to build out their networks and connect?
Yeah, so there's actually, at the highest level, there are three things that, and the book covers a lot more ground than this, but I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version here, which is really three things that activators are doing. The first thing is that they commit to business development. And I think that in some ways, I've had lawyers tell me that's a tautology, because you're saying the people who do the most business development are the most successful business developers. Yeah. But think about it. Like, how often, especially if we don't like sales and we don't like doing this, we will come up with any excuse to let it slide off the calendar and not carve out time and protect it. Activators don't do it. They carve out and they preserve and they protect time to do business development, because that's their lifeblood. Mm-hmm. And they know that, look, this client who's been loyal for a long time, they might tomorrow go with the competitor. And so I got to have a backup plan. I've always got to be adding and cultivating to my network and in working that pipeline of backup opportunities. The second thing is that connection, right? Building and managing your network, leveraging the breadth of your, all of your colleagues' expertise. Activators, again, they think of their network as their most important strategic asset. And so they're investing very, very deeply in, and what I don't want to give the impression of is that they're just adding LinkedIn connections and building a long mailing list and this kind of thing. Because the reality is, we know, not from our research, but from other research that's done many years ago, there's a guy named Robin Dunbar. You guys probably talk about this as well, the Dunbar number, right? Mm-hmm. There's a limit to the number of people we can have a close relationship with. And activators are the Dunbar number is actually 150. Technology can help us grow that a little bit. But if you got 5,000 LinkedIn connections, you're not going to have close relationships with 5,000 people. Right. So you've got to really prioritize your time on those clients who present the best opportunity to generate paid work and follow-on work, right? And cross-sell work for others in your organization. And you've got to be really careful of getting trapped in the friend zone. And we find this with average performers all the time. They invest all this time with folks, and they're the higher ups say, well, why are you spending so much time with X, Y, or Z clients? Say, well, one day they're going to be a huge client. But it's like, at some point, if they're not reciprocating, you got to make the hard choice to deprioritize them and to actually invest your time elsewhere. And then the last thing is that they create value. We talked about the idea that they bring ideas proactively, whether that's through a newsletter, whether it's by a phone or a LinkedIn outreach or an email, just saying, hey, I was thinking about you, and I think there's an opportunity for us to work together on this, or this is something I'm seeing from some other clients. Should we hop on a call and discuss? But I think also, Brian, there's an element of the kind of value that activators are trying to create. I think at the highest level, if we talk about building professional relationships between clients and their professionals, we talk about two primary sources of value typically. One is that we deliver business value to our clients. We help them make money, save money, or avoid risk. The second is that we deliver trust value. So we deliver our work in an above board, transparent, truthful, ethical way, and we hit the client's expectations or exceed them. For many, many years, that was kind of the core of what it meant to be a trusted advisor, somebody who delivers business impact and does it in a trustworthy way.
Right.
Activators, though, focus on a third dimension of value, something we call personal value. So personal value, and be really careful here that I don't mean to suggest it's knowing your client's kids' names or remembering their birthday. That's just being a nice person, and you should keep doing that. That's good stuff, right? But this is about understanding for your client outside of the paid work you could help them with, in the business work you could help them with, what's important to them personally. What are they trying to accomplish in their jobs, in their careers, in their current position? Are they under pressure in their job in some way that you might be able to assist them? Are they passionate about a cause outside of work? Are they
Yep.
dealing with a personal challenge? So you think about the agents out there and the kinds of relationships you can develop with your clients, and think about this: you want to do great work, you want to do it in a trustworthy way, but when you can also think about them as a person, and is there a way that you or one of your colleagues in your firm, or maybe somebody in your network, you could make an introduction, say, just for instance, hey, Brian, I noticed you just moved to New York. You've been in San Diego for a very long time. If it would be helpful to you, I'd love to introduce you to some folks. They live actually in the next town over. At
Right.
least compare notes on schools and restaurants and things to do on the weekend.
Yep.
Great to have a friend when you arrive in town. Those kinds of things, in being thoughtful and helpful at a personal level, that creates real stickiness for activators in the client relationship.
Well, we have clients going amen and amen, and it's such a fabulous complementary piece. I would say the book is called The Activator Advantage, and what Rainmakers today are doing differently. What I love about it, it's a fresh coat of paint based on data research coming from a lot of the legal profession that opens up for our customers. And we have tens of hundreds of thousands of people listening to this today who've been following our system for years. And I just highly recommend, like this dynamic we just talked about with the Dunbar number. 30 years ago, I used to quote the Gallup organization, which said you could maintain 285 close relationships.
Yeah.
And I taught that for years. And what's happened is, in the world we live in today, with remote work, people out of state, social media, all the defense mechanisms that people have today, that number's down to 150. And so even myself, what I've been doing, Matt, is after 30 years in this business, I've made a conscious effort to get back into the smaller groups. Like I said, we just did this live event in Vegas, but we had 150 people in the VIP seats.
Yeah.
And just the night before, my team's normally, we have big long hours and lines, and people get them through the line. I'm like, nope. I'm going to talk to every person. I want to hear their stories. I want to connect. We're here to hang out. There's no time clock. I'm just here to... And people went and they had this great experience. We had a personal coaching session afterwards, all these great things after the event took place. But people said hanging out the night before was one of their greatest experiences.
Very powerful.
You know, and it's just magical stuff. So there's so much. We've just skimmed the surface, to be candid here. I highly recommend everyone working by referral. The Activator Advantage is kind of like, to me, it's an accelerator to the philosophy you've bought into and the system you utilize. And I just highly recommend it. It's really well studied. There's beautiful research, and then also well presented to bring to life how next level those old fundamentals you're doing really are. And so we really appreciate it. Matt, well, we have a few minutes left, and again, we've done a little a slight aftershave on the book, but I think it's very attractive. I'd just love to finish up with some rapid fire questions.
Sure,
we ask
fire
everybody,
away. Yeah.
Which is, I'm sure you've done this before with different people. So what's the single best piece of advice Matt Dixon's ever received?
Oh, my goodness. Business or personal? I don't know. Actually, they might be the same. It's just know when to shut up might be the good. That might be more autobiographical, Brian. My wife tells me this a lot. But I actually, I had this conversation with somebody recently about career advice, and I think it was something that an old boss of mine told me, is that I used to always try to be kind of good at everything. And I worked in a company for almost 20 years where the people who made it to the highest ranks of the organization were these really broad generalists, like good at operations, understanding of finance and IT, and great people managers and great product folks. And I tried to fashion myself the same way. And then what I think I realized, I had a boss who said, look, you're really spiky. You're very good at these things. There's other people who are better, and you just don't have the passion or the interest. You could be good at those things, but are you ever going to be as good as that person? Maybe not. And so maybe really focus on what makes you who you are and embrace that. And you don't have to be all things to all people, right? We talk about that in business all the time. But I think kind of allowing myself to be spiky and not try to be a generalist, that served me pretty well.
Well, I've had to learn not to have major meetings during or after events, because I get all adrenalized up, and I get into these meetings, and I end up not knowing when to shut up because I'm so jacked up. And it's and I'm in the meeting, and I catch myself, and I go, "Oops! I just sucked all the oxygen out of the room." This is not a seminar, Brian. So I think that's a powerful lesson. What one talent or gift do you wish you possessed that you currently don't?
Oh, wow. Probably knowing when to shut up. No. Oh boy. I actually think I am, as a kind of back to the spikiness point before, I think I am very good at knowing what I'm not very good at, and so I think I've got a very finely attuned sense of that. I think I'm also very good at picking out people and bringing people in who can complement me and support me around the things I'm not so good at. I think a skill, though, back to the knowing when to shut up. I think I do. Sometimes the battle is lost and you've got to declare defeat. And I will tend to hold on to an opinion a little bit too long. Again, you could tell I was just having an argument when I were at home right before this recording. Well, I would have said like holding my breath for a long time underwater or flying or something, being invisible. I don't know, but knowing when to shut up would be a pretty good skill.
Okay, you're a really good writer, and really good writers are really good readers. What book has been most instrumental in your life?
So I get asked this a lot. I mean, I grew up as a graduate student, and then later in life reading
Where'd you go to school?
So I went to a small liberal arts school called Mount St. Mary's in northern Maryland, and then I went to University of Pittsburgh for my PhD in political economy. And so I really got into kind of behavioral economics and cognitive psychology and these kinds of things. And so I've read a lot of, Kahneman and Tversky and, Dan Ariely and, I love kind of pop business literature. So Dan Pink and Malcolm Gladwell and Ori Brofman, these guys. But my favorite book and the thing that I think really changed the way I think, because I pride myself on being a researcher, but also a storyteller. So I like it. You can generate a lot of research that is really boring and nobody will change their behavior based on it. But if you can figure out how to package it tightly in a sticky frame and in a sticky story and message, that gets people to remember it and want to do something about it. And so that's the hard part, I think. And there's a book called Made to Stick by the Heath brothers, Dan and Chip Heath.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just a great book. It's about why ideas stick and why some do and some don't. And they've got a really interesting formula. And that, when I was coming up the ranks in my old company, we were doing research and we turn it into speeches and content that we would present to executives who are very attention deprived and very busy. And we had to grab them by the lapels and shake them out of their comfort zone and get them to do something about our research. Otherwise, it was just a bunch of bar charts, right? But we had to come up with this story and the messaging. That was our Bible. And all of us as kind of content delivery folks and researchers really tried to stick to some of the principles there. It's all great to have amazing data, but if you can't turn it into a sticky idea and message and framework, then it's like the tree that fell in the woods that nobody heard.
Yeah, great. Love it. Love Dan and Chip Heath.
Yeah.
What one movie do you watch over and over? You're scrolling through the channels, just trying to brain dead time, and it's on, and you always stop. What's the one that gets you?
I've always been a sucker. I'm a history buff personally, and so I've always been a sucker for anything about World War II. I get kind of sucked into. So I'm a little bit like, I feel like sometimes like Tony Soprano, where I'm watching the History Channel late at night. So
a bowl of ice cream. On comes The Longest Day.
I know. That's right.
That's great.
But I mean, I like that, but I'm also action, kind of sci-fi, whatever. I grew up, but one of my favorite memories as a kid was when my dad took me to go see Star Wars. I think it was the first and last time actually. He and I went to go see a movie together, and I think he wanted to see it, and I saw it, and I just was blown away. And then I remember like just waiting and counting down the days till the next movie came out as a kid, and just and I waited in line on the opening day, and it was snowing or raining or so it was miserable out, and we stood in line for like 5 hours to get like the last few seats in the theater. So Star Wars is one of those that just pulls at my heartstrings.
And my family, I got 6 kids, and they're all Star Wars fanatics. We've been they go to the conferences. I've been to the conferences 2 times. I remember one time we were in London, and we're laying on the floor 4 hours before the event. And I said, Beverly, I turned to my bride and I go, other than Jesus, who would you sit on a concrete floor for 4 hours for? And she goes, my children. And I went, okay.
There you go.
All right, last but not least, Matt Dixon, what does a good life mean to you?
I think a good life is making a positive impact on the people around you, and that can come. It feels like maybe a little bit of a platitude, but that's your spouse, it's your kids, it's your family and your friends, and it's the people who work with you. I started this business, DCM Insights, back in early 2022 with a couple of my co-founders, and we've now got 20 employees and dozens of 1099 contractors around the world, who came to us and rely on us for a paycheck and for advancement and learning, and so you feel a lot of obligation. This as a business owner yourself, and your listeners surely know this as entrepreneurs, and that's both a great it's a tremendous amount of responsibility.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure, but when you feel like people are getting value and they're excited to be with you on this business journey, on this entrepreneurial journey, I mean, it's just incredibly rewarding to see you have a positive impact on people.
Bobby Jones used to say there's golf and then there's competitive golf.
Yeah.
There's people who write about business, and then there's people who have businesses who write.
Yeah.
And it's a completely different perch to sit in, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I greatly appreciate that you're a practitioner of the very stuff you're teaching.
Yeah.
And I really believe, like, it's been rare for me in 30 years, because I'm a history guy, I'm a research guy, and you've done a fabulous job with your team on this book, The Activator Advantage.
Thank you, Brian.
And I've spent my last 40 years living and teaching to sort and qualify your relationships, pour into them, exceed expectation, have a systematic approach, and then gently curate the referral.
There you go.
And I believe all the folks who love working by referral, who've enjoyed our podcast and seminars over the years, would greatly, greatly benefit from the book. It's brilliant work, well written, and kudos to you, Matt. It's great to meet you.
Thank you,
and
sir.
Thanks
It's
for being a guest on our show today.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Great. As well, we finish up today. I'll finish off with the Irish blessing my mother gave on this podcast for 9 years. As many of you know, she passed away 2 months ago. Lovely little Irish gal. And she's in heaven today watching us do this show, and I'm going to finish off with her little Irish blessing. May the roads rise up to meet you, and may the wind always be at your back. May the rain fall soft upon your fields and the sunshine warm upon your face. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the hollow of his hand, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining.